to hear from our Innovator of the Year, a time-honored tradition here at CIX. I'm not introducing the Innovator of the Year, but I'm introducing the person that's going to introduce the Innovator of the Year. KPMG has been a proud partner of this part of the evening, and now I'd like to bring in Seamus Blackmore, who is the partner and lead of the Lighthouse GTA product team at KPMG, to do the honors.
My name is Seamus Blackmore, and I'm really happy to be here representing KPMG. We are very proud to sponsor this award for Aidan. Aidan Gomez is a shining example for young founders in Canada. I was actually here roughly a year ago, and I was watching a fireside chat between Sam Altman and Tobias Luca, and the CEO of Shopify. And one of the key things that Tobias said at the end of it really struck me. He said he was worried that although Canada has always been at the forefront of AI research, that we might not be able to capitalize on the commercialization and the revolution that's to come. And I'm so happy to see a perfect counterpoint to that in Aidan Gomez. Aidan, for those of you who don't know, certainly has done his part in the research space. He actually was one of the co-authors of the paper that really kicked all of this off. It's called Attention is All You Need. But he took that insight and went and co-founded a multi-billion-dollar AI company right here in Canada. So when you think about commercialization of AI, there's no better example than Aidan Gomez, and that's why he deserves this Innovator of the Year award, and we're very happy to sponsor it. I've also got the pleasure to introduce Kory Jeffrey here from Inovia Capital. He's going to come on and he's going to do a fireside chat and enjoy some time with our floating head, Aidan, who's going to be on screen. So please. Thank you very much.
Hey, Aidan.
Hey, can you hear me?
I can hear you, yeah. This is fulfilling some sort of like childhood fantasy of talking to Zordon.
Yeah, I'm sorry that I couldn't be there in person. And yeah, I'm currently in France, so it's quite late. So if I'm a little bit slow and sleepy, I apologize to the audience. I also can't see you, so I don't know if you're smiling.
Well, there is a room full of investors and founders and people from the startup ecosystem who are here to celebrate you and Cohere. Where in the world do we find you today?
Currently in Lyon in France, just visiting.
Very cool. So Aidan, you and I know each other because my partner in crime and I, Steve Woods, had the privilege of leading your last round for Series C. But before that, I had worked with Steve and Nick at Google, where you were also at Google. And I think that that's sort of a starting place where the Cohere founding story sort of kicks off. So maybe we could start the conversation with, where you, Ivan, and Nick kind of pulled it all together.
Yeah, so I had been at Google when I met Nick for only a few months, maybe 4 or 5 months. And I started out in the Bay Area. So like many Canadian computer science students, we all kind of had to go to the Valley to find ambitious, globally relevant, impactful projects to work on. So I went down to the Bay Area, joined Google Brain, which it was their AI research division before it merged with DeepMind. And I was part of the team that created the transformer, which is a T in ChatGPT. It's like this neural network architecture which underpins pretty much every large language model that people interact with and build today. And then after I finished that project in the Bay Area, I wanted to return to Toronto. I studied at U of T, so I had to finish my undergrad. And it was there that I connected with Jeff Hinton. And he invited me to intern with him at Google in the Brain office. And I met Nick, who was like his godson, super close. To this day, they play chess together every Monday. And And so I was jealous of Nick. Like when I joined the Google Brain office, he was close to the person who created our entire field. He was like best friends with him. And so I really looked up to Nick, and I wanted to, work with him and follow what he did. And so we collaborated while I was at Brain in Toronto. And then with Ivan, I met Ivan around a similar time. But Ivan was an interesting one because I came back from the Valley. I was in U of T. I joined the ML group there that Roger Gross and Raquel and Jeff led. And I just had all these ideas. And I had some compute because Roger Gross gave me some of U of T's compute cluster. And I didn't have enough time to pursue all these ideas. So I messaged the University of Toronto computer science group chat. And I was like, hey, does anyone want to do AI research? And, for some reason, this dropout from U of T, who wasn't enrolled in U of T anymore, but was still in the Slack channel, he messaged me. And that turned out to be Ivan. And so he had dropped out of school completely. He was working on startups. And I started working with him. And he was like the most effective, hard worker, fastest learner, completely self-taught. So he went from like zero AI knowledge at all. And in 4 months, we had a paper at ICLR, like one of the top AI conferences. So I think both Nick and Ivan just really impressed upon me as like two brilliant, hyper ambitious people at the top of their field. And so when we were mulling about startup ideas, they were the two people that first came to mind. I knew that I wanted to start up in Toronto. I didn't want to go to the Valley. I experienced that. I think I'm very happy that we started in Toronto. Well, maybe we can talk about that later. Starting up in Canada is unique. I think the previous speakers said it well. Starting a company is hard. Starting a company in Canada is harder. But despite that, I really value the contributions that Canada has brought to Cohere. Many of our rounds have been led by Canadian institutions. We have some of the best talent in the world. And I think Toby is right to say, we're at risk of losing that. So similar to how I had to go down to the Bay Area to find a globally relevant, ambitious company, part of the reason why Nick, Ivan, and I wanted to start Cohere in Toronto was to prevent that for future generations of students. We want to give them something that is globally relevant and right here at home. So that's what we've been trying to do. And I think Canada has been massively supportive of that. And I count myself as insanely lucky to have met Nick and Ivan, to have met them in Canada, and to have started up there.
Awesome. So in the early days, I think the Transformer paper that you co-authored, what was that, 2017? Was that?
2017.
2017. Yeah. Okay, so 2017 until, let's call it like the ChatGPT moment when the rest of the world sort of wakes up to LLMs. Are there any stories in the background of like, as you and Nick and Ivan and the team at Cohere are building, what will end up being the next generation of LLMs? Are there any like light switch moments? Is this something that the research community knew was, inevitable, or how did those early days before the whole world caught on go?
Yeah, there was loads of surprises. The technology is very surprising. I think it starts right from scratch, which is the idea is really simple. It's like beautiful in its simplicity and elegance. Basically, all you need to do is get a really big supercomputer, tons of compute, and tons of data, like web scale data. And if you put those two together, you get something that is just extraordinarily capable. We could have existed in a universe where it wasn't that easy. It wasn't just, make more chips and collect more data. So we got quite lucky. I think that shocked me. It still shocks me that we're able to get so much out of such a simple idea. that scale in compute and data leads to intelligence and capability. But of course, along the way, there were places where technologically Cohere made missteps, right? Like maybe we were late to instruction fine-tuning. And it was a surprise to us that you need to collect human annotated data to improve the capabilities of models. And so there were definitely places where things really run counter to your intuition. And you discover that there are tricks tricks or truths that aren't intuitive, but just seem to work. And so I think the process of building these models, it's been like compiling a bag of tricks. And some of them are obvious, some of them are less obvious, but when you put them all together, you just see an incremental increase in performance, and that's been sustained over, at this point, years. So we don't know where that stops. And certainly I think not just Cohere, but all of us in this field, we're all pushing to find those next tricks, to find the next sources of lift that will take us to the next level of model. And that was true predating large language models. Like even when we were working on the transformer itself, the transformer came together in like 4 months. So it was a super quick project, like very, very scrappy, very fast. It was like a startup. And it's a bag of tricks. It's like a kind of Frankenstein architecture of these ideas that were floating out in the ecosystem that we just glued together, and it worked really well. That continues. That spirit continues, and that really is the basis for the gains that we've seen over the past 4 or 5 years.
Makes sense. I mean, when you look at the model ecosystem today, which has been, changing at a rapid pace, you have, private model companies like Cohere, you have offerings from the hyperscalers, you have an open source community of models and people taking Lambda 2, fine tuning, whatever for verticalized use cases. What makes Cohere different, and how do you see those different pieces?
Yeah, so I think the first thing is that we're independent. So we haven't taken, a massive investment from a large cloud player where, money comes off balance sheet, goes into the company, and then goes right back in as cloud revenue. We haven't done one of those. And so that makes fundraising harder because it's very easy to find dollars when the person giving them to you gets them right back in a few months. So we have to go to institutional investors and strategics that actually want to use our product and partner with us. And so it's a tougher fight, but it's better for the customer. It lets us preserve our independence. We don't get locked into one ecosystem. And so that's been our priority is keeping our independence and keeping choice so that we can work with everyone. We can serve on all major clouds, on-prem, whatever the customer needs, we'll do it. The second one is our focus on enterprise. So we're not building a ChatGPT competitor or some sort of consumer subscription service. We're very squarely focused on being a platform for enterprises to adopt the technology. And that focus lets us really prioritize the types of use cases that we're going to tackle and get very good at them. So, we might not be that helpful with helping you do your homework or generating a picture of a unicorn with a cat riding it. But we're extremely, extremely good at domains like finance, medicine, legal, domains that enterprises actually care about and operate in. We perform extremely, extremely well.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, it's something I believe in, obviously, as having led the last round. Question then for you is, when generative AI started to become, a large topic in the boardroom, especially for large enterprises, it felt like we saw a lot of rush to AI-ify things, and then maybe a bit of a lull as, especially in the enterprise space, people started to think about what that would actually entail. It'd be interesting to get from your point of view what you folks have seen in terms of the adoption readiness of enterprise writ large for large language models.
It's getting there, I think enterprise is slow. It's very slow. Consumers adopt stuff super fast. Enterprises take their time. I've been building the company for about 4.5 years now. And for the first 3 years, I would go into C-suites, I would meet with board members, I would tell them about what we're building and the technology, and I would say, this is really important, you should care about it. And they would be like, cool science project, they just didn't really get it. And with, to credit OpenAI, with ChatGPT, once it was put into consumers' hands, once people had a first-party experience with it, everyone woke up. And so I think it's still early. ChatGPT was only 1.25 years ago, and enterprises have moved slower than that, but we're starting to see the first seeds of real returns on this technology, real adoption. So last year, I talk about 2023 as like the year of the POC. Pretty much every board and C-suite, they heard the buzz about large language models, and they got their teams testing it out, building familiarity with it, experimenting with product space, right? Like, what can we build with this? Can we transform our products and services? Can we build tools for our employees? And so those POCs were spun up. Now they're starting to go to production. And so we're starting to go live. For instance, with Oracle, about a month ago, we went live with something like 30 to 50 new features in their product suite, in their Fusion apps. And so it's actually hitting, hundreds and soon thousands of enterprises and having an impact. I think we're still so early in terms of impact. Like, the adoption, it takes time. It's a completely new technology. No one has bought a model before. It's a completely new buying process. No one has integrated or worked with a model before this. And you have to speak to them. You have to prompt them. It's a new tech stack to interface with. And so there's been a huge upskilling process over the course of the past year. But we've just dipped our toes in the water. To really start to see the gains, I think there's going to be another 2 or 3 years of integration, like actually getting this technology into products, into the hands of employees to speed them up and make them more productive. So I think, in my opinion, last year was sort of the testing phase. Now we're starting to go to production, but it's going to take a while for that production deployment to actually be realized and seen through.
Okay, I have time for one more question, it looks like. And I think the one I'd like to end on is, Aidan, you talked about building a large, meaningful company from Canada being hard. And you have a room here, like I said, full of VCs, founders, and people from the tech ecosystem. Any advice for folks in terms of, what you think that people should be focused on as they think about how to build this ecosystem out?
Yeah, I think being cognizant of some of our Canadian biases. I think we have a little brother complex. And so we see the States as something, bigger than us, more powerful. We can't do what they can do. They're amazing. And that's completely wrong. Completely wrong. We invented AI here. This is the place where all the preliminary work was done. And then we just, for free, exported all of our talent down to the States to grow their GDP and their companies. I think that's a tragedy. And so I think being conscious of that bias that exists within us and over modesty and pushing against it. It's the same thing like in large enterprise. Canadian enterprise represents a tiny, tiny sliver of Cohere's revenue. It's all American. And Canadian enterprises are adopting this technology. It's just that they have a sort of bias towards American big tech. And so there's not enough Canadian pride and, I don't want to say nationalism, but there's certainly no Canadian nationalists, right? And so we need champions. We need people who really take Canada seriously and want to grow it, want to invest it, want to make it a globally relevant force. And I think that takes each of us. The folks in this room are the leaders who are allocating the capital that decides what happens over the course of the next decade. And so being aware of that bias and then pushing against it, making a concerted effort to support our ecosystem and to basically unlock a new generation of Canadian companies. We kind of like, Toby's incredible, but he's the only big tech player in Canada. There's like a proof point of one, at least there's one. I told this to Toby, proof by existence. At least I could point to Shopify and say, it can be done. Look, this exists. We need more of those. Like our tech project, it failed over the past 20 years. And so it's really up to the folks in this room deploying capital to change that. Lastly, I'll say, in the last opening remarks, they were talking about how growth capital in Canada is difficult. I think that's extremely true. It's easy to get venture checks and it's easy to start a company. Like anyone can sort of start up and get enough money to get going. We have a really tough time taking risky bets to grow globally relevant companies in the growth phase. We can't get our heads around it. And so we need that sort of deep ambition to change the world and to have Canada be a globally relevant player. So I hope we'll start to see that culture change here.
Awesome. Well, Aidan, thank you for joining us. And you can't see it, but there is a trophy here for you and the team that the CIX team will bring to your office, I'm sure. And congratulations.
Thank you so much.
Again.
I wish I could be there. Thank you so much.
Awesome.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.